Well, another busy day. We watched a few moments ago at the White House as President Trump had a joint news conference with the President of Romania, and the President of the United States had his first opportunity at that news conference to address yesterday's testimony of the former FBI Director James Comey, and he did address it, and one of the news items that he addressed, or some of the news that he made, centered around the fact that he has pledged to testify himself if questioned by the special counsel Robert Mueller. 100%, he said. He said he would testify. Let's bring in the former Undersecretary for International Trade, our guest in the studio, former White House Director for Political Affairs, and an author of a newly released book that's called Homefront to Battlefront. Frank Lavin is here. It's a World War II book, right?
That's right, Colonel.
Good to see you, Frank, again. I got to know Frank when I did a reporting trip to China years ago, so it's good to see you. I know you still live in China, so you're here in New York with some book work and get a chance to talk to us about this news conference that just wrapped up. It was one of these things like the testimony that was built up all day. We wondered what the president would say, and he did go right after Jim Comey. A leaker. He called him a few choice names and then said he'd be happy to be questioned about it himself. Yeah,
it was a pretty forceful moment for President Trump, and to my mind, that's what he needed to do. Comey had a pretty effective day yesterday. It was a pretty powerful testimony on his part, so the president really needed to come back, I think, reasonably aggressively, and I think he did so.
Now, the question is he quote-unquote vindicated? That's what the White House has been saying. Is that a stretch in your view?
Well, I think this issue is not going to go away in 24 hours of back and forth, but what it does do is I think takes the immediate Comey allegations off the table, and the issue is going to go to Mueller, the special counsel, and his investigation.
But are they legitimate questions? Is that a phrase that's worth using about, whether the president got in the way of an investigation or maybe obstructed justice?
Well, but I'm saying if there's no proof, it's simply Comey's word against Trump's word.
Right, unless they're tapes, which we don't know. Even after this, we don't know if there are. Now, we're going to talk to you about foreign policy. I want to ask you about the UK election, which I thought was fascinating and obviously surprising, which is what the president himself said when he was asked about it earlier. But he made some foreign policy news, I thought. Remember, everybody made a big deal when he was overseas that he didn't seem to commit to Article 5 of NATO, which essentially means, hey, you attack one NATO country, you're attacking them all. He did today.
He did. That was smart of him. I think that was widely viewed as probably the greatest substantive shortcoming of his trip to Europe, and he was criticized for it, so he doubled back on it, and he said, just so there's no misunderstanding, he is firmly committed to Article 5. So I think that's very reassuring to the allies.
Right. That'll be a bigger story, one of those things that'll play in the European news, most likely, more so than it might even play here with everything we're
Well, I think you're right, and also, to my mind, another positive element is, look, this is a president who can do a course correction, that if he had an understatement or a misstatement at a previous event when he went to NATO headquarters, he can now correct it and find his way out of that. So
let me ask you about the UK. That was a surprise what happened. I mean, we'd been, building up the populist waves that are moving across the world, and I know you've seen it in some places that you've been, and then all of a sudden Theresa May does not do so well last night.
She underperformed. Yeah, it was a surprise, and I think this doesn't bode well for the Brexit negotiations they're going to. She needs to have a strong hand to play. She's going to have tough negotiations. She's now got a weak hand, and as you know, when your government barely has a majority, everybody is frozen. Nobody wants to take a kind of bold move you might need to take Brexit along. So I don't think this bodes well for Britain playing a leadership role.
Is it a big, is there a big picture message here? The president here has come in with what some have called an anti-trade message. I don't know, the Treasury Secretary had a news conference last hour up in Canada talking about redoing NAFTA, but there's been so much talk about nationalism, as you know, and all this type of stuff. Is there a big picture message?
I'd be careful about overanalyzing it on that basis, Connell. I think what happened was the Tories, the Conservatives, just ran a bad campaign. When you're running against a very weak opponent in Corbyn, a fellow who was really pretty hard left, they should have let him self-destruct. And instead, they went out with a party manifesto which didn't cut the mustard, and it really undercut them. So I think she deserves criticism, unfortunately, for just some tactical miscues.
Wasn't a very strong candidate, as it turned out. Something we've heard before. Frank, thank you, sir.
Donald,
it's good to see you again. Very good to see you, and good luck with the book. Okay?
Thanks so much.
Frank Lavin.